Why is it so hard to find a book that you actually like? Now, when I was young, I used to love going to the library. Initially, it was because they had these computers you could book and play games on. Now, I remember I used to play this really bad Mulan game, for example. But fortunately, later on in my life, I didn't go to the library for bad video games on the community computers, but for the books. Now, I know for some young people today, overstimulated by TikTok and social media, the library might feel like an alien concept. I mean, it's a quiet, almost sacred space disconnected from the fast-paced, attention-demanding world they're used to. But for me, back then, the library was a magical place. It was where doors to new worlds were waiting to be opened, and the mere thought of all the stories hidden on those shelves filled me with excitement. Even my school's tiny library felt like a treasure trove. I would go there during my breaks, not necessarily to read, but just to look at the covers and wonder what magical adventures were hidden inside of them. The anticipation of picking out a new book was almost as thrilling as reading it. My absolute favorite book as a child was When the Robbers Came to Cardamom Town, which I read in my mother tongue, Faroese. Now, for those unfamiliar, it's considered one of the most important works of Norwegian literature. It's about a peaceful little town plagued by 3 robbers who spend their time stealing things until they're eventually reformed and even end up saving the town by extinguishing a fire in the tower. I can't tell you how many times I read that book. I mean, I didn't care that I knew every plot line, every character's dialogue, and every plot twist. The story was simple, sure, but as a kid, it wasn't about the complexity or surprise. It was about the fun. Reading When the Robbers Came to Cardamom Town was like revisiting an old friend. It didn't matter that I already knew how the story would unfold. The magic was in the experience of reading. Now fast forward to today and I'm 28 years old, and honestly, I can't help but feel like finding a book I can truly immerse myself in has become harder. I mean, you think that with the rise of BookTok, BookTube, online bookstores, and libraries scatters all over my city, and also I'm part of a large book community, that it would be easier than ever to discover that perfect book. And yet, even with hundreds of options to choose from, I still catch myself struggling to find that one book that will absolutely hook me. Now, why is this? Have books themselves changed, or are they just not as magical anymore? Or is it me? Have I simply grown out of that wide-eyed wonder I used to have as a kid? Or is there something deeper going on here? Something about the way we consume media, or how our expectations as readers have shifted? It's a question I've been thinking about a lot lately, and today I would love to discuss it. Well, let's start with the obvious theory. Maybe it is me that has changed, not the books. I mean, I genuinely consider it a blessing that I didn't grow up in the era of TikTok and constant social media bombardment, overstimulating and frying everyone's brains. Sure, I had a PlayStation as a kid, and I was allowed to watch TV occasionally, but really, the competition for my attention back then was not nearly as intense as it is now. That slower pace of life gave me the space to discover the quiet beauty in books. Now, when I was a kid, I didn't have a smartphone in my pocket, and Facebook was still in its infancy when I became a teenager. Entertainment wasn't as accessible or on demand as it is now, so I had to find it elsewhere, for example by hanging out with my friends, playing video games, or better yet, getting lost in the pages of a book. I remember being considered a bit nerdy at times because I loved reading series like Harry Potter or The Hunger Games and Twilight. Okay, the last one was a joke, but I wasn't seen as an outlier, you know? Reading was still something a lot of kids and teens did, whether they admitted it or not. Now fast forward to 2024 and I can't even imagine recommending a 200 to 300 page book to a random teenager and actually having them sit down and read it. Back when I was a kid, if a friend or a family member recommended me a book, I mean, I'd seriously consider picking it up. But today, it feels like that connection to books is becoming harder and harder to find among younger people. Another thing that has dramatically changed since I was younger is the need to know how almost everything works. Like, for example, how do you create a successful website? And if that's you, then having an all-in-one website is crucial. Which brings me to today's sponsor, Squarespace. Squarespace is the all-in-one website platform for entrepreneurs and those looking to build their brand and business online. So whether you've been in the entrepreneur game for a long time, you're just starting, or maybe you're trying to manage a growing brand, Squarespace makes it so incredibly easy to create exquisite websites while simultaneously allowing you to engage with your audience and to sell whatever kind of service or products you may have. It is all in one place and it's on your terms. And if you're a little unsure about using Squarespace, do not fear. Squarespace provides every single tool you'll need to create your dream website. They have literally hundreds of layout options and every single one of them is customizable with a new design intelligence, which, by the way, combines 2 decades of industry-leading design expertise with cutting-edge technology. It will empower you to build a beautiful, personalized, and excellently tailored tailored websites that will fit your unique needs and original identity. So you can head over to squarespace.com to start your free trial today. And when you're ready to launch your website, you can head over to squarespace.com/libraryofaviking to save 10% off your first website. So let's continue the discussion between younger and older generations when it comes to reading. Now, I do admit my experience is anecdotal here, but it is part of a larger trend, which is that young people are simply not reading full-length books as much as they used to. I mean, it's not that they lack intelligence or curiosity, it's that their attention is being pulled in so many different directions. Now, a fellow booktuber called Jared Henderson recently made a video called Why Everyone Stopped Reading, where he perfectly summed up this cultural shift.
At universities all around the country, professors are reporting a problem. Students can't read books. This is true even at elite colleges and universities. In one required class at Columbia, students are often expected to read about a book a week. But in the past couple of years, students have started telling their professors that they can't do it. One student told her professor that she had never been required to read an entire book. This is part of a larger trend. People aren't reading anymore. This is true for men and women, people who went to college and people who didn't.
Now, I know this is a bit of a tangent on what was my original question, but it is clear that times have changed. I mean, a Gallup poll showed that only 6% of adults name reading as their favorite way to spend an evening, a 50% decrease from 2016. So yes, obviously I've changed since I was a kid, but I'm confident that this growing trend of people not seeing reading as a hobby or even as something enjoyable has impacted me as well. And on top of having to constantly fight the urge to not pick up my phone, I'm also surrounded by a culture where reading isn't prevalent as it once was. And beyond that, there's the simple reality that I've grown older as well. Life has become busier. I mean, in the past decade, so much has changed in my life. I moved away from home, I went through university, I got married, I started paying bills, I'm now managing finances, I'm serving at my local church, I'm spending time with family and friends, and creating content for my YouTube channel. My commitments have increased significantly. I mean, I think back to when I was a kid and how often I would come home from school with almost nothing on my plate. Sure, I might have like 20 minutes of homework, but after that, my time was mine. I could spend hours without any guilt or interruptions, but now it's a completely different story. These days, when I get home, I am thinking about a million different things I need to do. For example, I need to clean the flat. I need to spend quality time with my wife, which I love, by the way. I need to decide whether I should go for a run or edit a YouTube video. Basically, what I'm saying here is that the things I had endless time for as a kid are now squeezed into the margins of an already packed schedule. And what's worse is that even when I finally carve out time to sit down with a book, I often find myself being distracted. I mean, sometimes I'll get stuck scrolling on my phone, which is seriously the worst. Or even worse, I'll start reading only to remember something I forgot to do, like sending an email to a friend or calling someone to do a task for me or whatever. It's not that I don't want to read. I mean, I do, but it's so much harder to create that space for reading and to feel as immersed as I once used to do. And I don't think I'm alone here. This is a common challenge I often face, and I think a lot of people as well. And that is that it's so hard to find the time to get invested in a book. I mean, reading is a commitment. The average person will probably spend like 5 to 15 hours reading a book, and how are you going to do that when you struggle to even find 30 minutes of peace and quiet? Moreover, the very nature of reading is that it's an investment that doesn't pay off instantly, but requires your attention and investment over several hours, while in the same time frame you probably could have overstimulated yourself by watching 500 TikToks. I mean, the gratification and satisfaction you get from reading can feel like it's not worth it when there are hundreds of other offers on the table that will give you that instant adrenaline rush. And while I don't have any hard empirical evidence to back this up, I also can't help but feel that the decrease in media literacy and the ever-growing presence of social media and other platforms designed to constantly grab and hold our attention are starting to influence the way books are written. We've already seen this happen in the world of film and television. I mean, many movies now are literally being made with the assumption that a significant portion of the audience will be half distracted scrolling on their phones while the story plays in the background. Now, this has led to changes in how stories are told. A lot of movies and TV shows today have faster pacing, shorter scenes, and constant hooks to try and reclaim the viewer's attention. Now, in the current publishing climate, I suspect we're starting to see a similar trend. Books are becoming noticeably shorter, which isn't inherently a bad thing, but it could be a sign of a shift in how stories are structured to cater to the modern reader. I mean, it's easy to speculate that authors might feel pressure to simplify plots, streamline writing styles, or cram more climatic moments into their stories just to keep the readers engaged in a world where attention spans are shorter than ever. Of course, this is purely my own observation, but I've noticed other readers expressing similar feelings when reflecting on the current state of publishing. I mean, if this trend is real, it means that it's not only you as a reader who has changed, but books themselves may be evolving to fit a fast-paced, distraction-filled world. And whether this is a good thing or not is up for debate. Initially, my thoughts are quite negative on this, but I suppose it could mean that stories will become more accessible to a wider audience. But on the other hand, it raises questions about whether we're losing some of the depth, complexity, and timelessness that makes stories truly unforgettable. It's also worth reflecting on how our tastes in books naturally grow as we become older. As previously mentioned, when I was a child, I could read When the Robbers Came to Cardamom Town over and over and over again without feeling the slightest tinge of boredom. It literally didn't matter how many times I'd heard the stories or read it, or how familiar I was with the characters, I could immerse myself completely every single time. But now, I'd probably struggle to lose myself in a story like that. And it's not because the story isn't good, it's because I have changed. Back then, I was drawn to tales where the characters were larger than life archetypes and the plot was fast paced and packed with action. It was all about the thrill of the adventure and that sense of wide-eyed wonder. But these days, while I can still enjoy an action-packed, fast-paced story now and then, I do find myself gravitating towards something different. I mean, I personally am drawn books with layers of complexity and stories with deeply nuanced characters, slower and more deliberate pacing, and a writing style that feels almost like art, you know? I tend to crave books that challenge me, make me think, and also leave me feeling something profound long after I've turned the last page. I mean, stories that delve into the emotional depths of the human experience or explore themes that stick with me and force me to reflect on them again and again are the books I gravitate towards. But as my taste has matured, there's also a catch, right? The more I read, the harder it becomes to find that one book that truly stands out. You know, that book that feels fresh, unique, and capable of reigniting that spark of excitement. And this is also where fatigue can creep in. I mean, when you read so many books and become so familiar with the patterns, the tropes, the structures of storytelling, it takes more for a story to really leave its mark. And unfortunately, it's a bittersweet truth about growing as a reader. On one hand, we develop a greater appreciation for the depth and artistry in storytelling, but on the other hand, it becomes harder to recapture the magic of that first all-consuming love for a book. But I think that's a part of the journey, right? I mean, it's not about chasing the same feelings we've had as a children, but it's about discovering new ways to connect with stories and finding joy in the process of that growth. But ultimately, I do think the truth is somewhere in the middle. I mean, you could make an argument that the publishing landscape has changed and it's near impossible to find a book that you will love in a vast array of choices, but I think the real truth is probably more related to us as human beings. The way we experience reading changes as we grow older, and how much a book will speak to us very often depends on our circumstances or the seasons of life we're in. And mix that in with a wide range of distractions and everyday stresses we have in our daily lives, and you find it's not that weird that it's really hard to find a book you actually love. As already mentioned, reading requires discipline, patience, focus, and time. But I hope that if you are watching this video and you feel like there are no good books out there anymore, then I would really encourage you to not give up. Books have literally changed my life for the better and have helped me think more deeply about the world and helped me focus better and feel less stressed. Moreover, stories are just beautiful and need to be experienced, and I can assure you there are hundreds of books out there that will blow your mind. You just need to find them. Now, if you feel like modern fantasy has changed and you want to know why, then check out this video. Oh, you're still here and you want more? Well, the good news is that I have a Viking book club on my Patreon. If you join my Patreon, then you get access to an exclusive book club where every single month we read one book together and the book can be put forward by you. If you join tier 3 or 4, then you can put a book forward and then I randomly choose a book from the pot that we end up reading together, and throughout the month we discuss the book on the Patreon chats, and then we also have Zoom hangouts, which honestly are some of my favorite times of the month. This month we're reading this book, and next month we're gonna be reading this book. Also, since I launched my Patreon, I basically spent my money back into the channel on video editing. I've had more than 40 videos professionally edited, so if you want to support what I do here and also help me upload more consistently, then I'll leave a link in the description down below.